So I've taken the sample project from that just comes as part of Revit, and just delete that out there. So it's this house. Everybody recognizes this house if you've used Revit before. It's just a standard simple project. So what I've done is, if we go back into the side view here, and we go down to at the bottom here where it's the sun and the shadow icons are placed. I've taken the site, if we go into sun settings and still, and I'm going to move it using this menu here to Alicante. So we have a kind of a realistic view of the project. So let's type in Alicante. There we go. And from memory, the site is somewhere up here. So let's just put it in the. It's more or less there, Antonio, is it?
South.
Bit south, bit here.
South.
South. More south. It's the next town.
You see Bonihuela?
Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's more or less right. More or less is okay. So we have it. Let's assume that we got it in the right place for the purposes of this, anyway. In Revit also we have this weather data. So there is dry bulb, wet bulb, and all those temperature and humidity factors that you need to calculate your constructions and your U values and all that kind of stuff. So let's just say OK. And we can see over here that it's actually placed the GPS coordinates here. And let's switch the time, still in the same sun menu, to the summer solstice. And we'll change it to 12 o'clock, let's say. Ground plane at level 1. And if I apply that, the shadows should change. Of course, my errors are coming in there. The shadows should change based on, so it's 12 o'clock, 21st of June, and this is the kind of shadowing situation we get. So it's a very high sunlight in this situation. So what we want to do now is actually understand how the shadows impact the internal spaces of the house. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to go into the plan view. And the plan view is something like this. Now, this site is orientated on the sheet north-south. So what you're seeing here is north-south. North is up the sheet and south is down the sheet. So you can see that we got the sun rising over here, coming around here during the day, and then setting on the side here. And in this side here, we have a glazed wall. We also have a glazed wall here that are full-height glazing. So you would say in a site like this, there is an issue with radiation and so forth, and how much sun is going to get into the building. But we want to actually have a way of showing that. If we come in here to the plan view and turn on go to the sun settings again, and we'll make it a still, and we just make sure that we do the same as before, because the sun settings are related to the views that you use. They're not related to the project in general. So let's set it to summer solstice. And if I apply that and press OK and then switch the shadows on, it gives us an idea of the depth of the building, but it's really just a presentation view of the plan, because what Revit does is it chops out the top layer above the plan when it's going to display just a plan view for you. So it's pretty useless when it comes to actually figuring out how the shadows lie in the building. So we can't use the standard plan view as yet. I've heard it's coming, but what we need to do is actually set up a 3D view without perspective in order to get a view that's realistic inside the building. So let's go up and do that. Is everybody following me so far? If you got any questions, just give me a shout. What I'll do is I'll do the shadow study once, and then I'll stop, and then I'll take questions on it, and then after that we'll do how to make a sunshade, okay? And then we'll you can basically, once I show you that, you can take it from there as to how you want to do it yourselves. So I'm going to come up here to this 3D view shortcut, and I'm going to set up a camera. And very important, you switch off the perspective view, otherwise you'll just get a nice 3D view of the building. I'm going to set the offset. The offset is set up automatically to show perspective. So it's set up at an average human height, which is 1750. So I'm going to change that to 1200, which is a standard plan cut in the building. And it says 1200 from level 1. And then we have this little camera icon that's sitting here. So I need to place it. So I'm just going to place it anywhere. It doesn't really matter where you place it. But I'm just going to place it here. And then I need to place what it's looking at. So it's asking at the bottom here, click to place the view target. You can see that down here. So what we get is something like that, which is kind of, not what we want at all. So we have to kind of play with that. So what we need to remember over here is that the eye elevation, it's quite simple in this project. It's 1200 millimeters, so the level 1 is set at 0. So we just need to remember that eye elevation is at 1200. If it was a 3-story house and we wanted to get a view of the 3rd story, we'd have to remember to get 1200 off the 3rd level. But in this case, it's quite simple, so we won't worry about that. So it's very important that the first thing you do is you set it so that you go to the top view, like this. Let's just open it up a bit so we can see it. And once we get to the top view, we've got a view of the entire house again. And this is kind of how it's awkward. But we set the target elevation to 0, and we set the eye elevation back to 1200 again. And if I apply that, it takes a cut through the house and it looks like a plan, but it's not. But what it is if I switch on the sun again, first we'll set the sun settings, make sure it's the same ones. We set it to summer solstice, we set it to 12 o'clock and apply. And now if I switch on the shadows, you can see that it's shadowing the entire building. It's not just taking this very creative shadow around the walls here. It's actually telling us how the building is accepting the sunlight. We can then go around the building, if I go back into the sun settings again, and I can just go around step by step, move it up to 13, move it up to 14, and so on, and see how the sun is affecting the building. You can see that over here, already at 2 o'clock, we've got sunlight coming directly into the dining room and the kitchen. So that probably means by the time it gets around to dinner time, the entire kitchen is being filled up with full-on sunlight in the middle of June, which is not an attractive situation in a Southern European situation. So that's kind of how you analyze on a room-by-room basis how the sun is affecting the design that you've made. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold a pause on this, and I'm going to get everybody to do it, okay? And I'll do it again as many times as it takes. So let's just pause this. Okay, there's one thing that we can also do with this. Before we leave this shadow diagram stuff behind, we can also use it to, we can get Revit to calculate the illuminance of the room as how much incident light is falling within the room. And that's what the cloud service is for. So if we leave this like this, and this can be more or less useful depending on the type of project it is, but just to show you how it works. If we go into the View tab and we select Render in Cloud, we have to be connected to the internet and we have to be signed in with an Autodesk ID for this to function. Hopefully a student ID, so it won't cost you any money. So we wait for it to connect. There it is. So we're taking the view that we're in now. It's called 3D View 1. The output type we change from a still image to an illuminance diagram. And once we get in here, we have all these values in here. The first thing we go to is legend, and that automatically goes to the US measurement for light. So we change that from foot candles to lux, which is the European one. And for our purposes, we can just change it to automatic. And you can change it to different types of sky. Now, I don't want to really get into this stuff because, first of all, I'm not an expert on it, but also because it's concept stage, you're really just interested in the difference in levels within there. Location and time, we can say use date from view. And if I press start rendering, you can see it's telling us it's going to take 10 minutes to do it. So So start rendering. It's sending all that information up to the cloud, Autodesk cloud, and it will supposedly make a judgment, or sorry, it'll make an image of the incident light within the rooms. I can now press continue in background, and it keeps running up here, so it'll be finished in a few minutes. But luckily, I've got one I did earlier. So you can see that you can always go and look at your renders by pressing this button here, Render Gallery, and that'll open up the web page that has your renders on it. So I'm just going to show all renderings. Or was it this one? Yeah, so this is one I've done before. So here's an Illuminance rendering showing the incident lux within the house itself. And you can see this red where it's coming through the windows here. This is quite high. That's pretty high. 50,000 or so, which is about 5 times more than you really want coming in the window there. So again, I'm just showing you the tools here. The interpretation of the tools is for another lecture, but you can use that for, if you read up on it, you can use it to make certain justifications for your design process. Okay, so that's just by the by. Now, what I want to show you is how to make a simple, a trick in Revit to make a simple sunshade, because if we start making sunshades, we start playing with families, and we start adding all this kind of stuff to it, we spend ages doing things. What we want to do is very quickly make a sunshade for the design process, apply it to the building, see how it affects the shading, and then modify it afterwards. So it's actually part of the design process, rather than you're just playing with 3D modeling. So I'm just going to go into the 3D view here. And let's assume we're going to put a sunshade on these windows here at certain times of the day. The actual way to do it, the trick, is to use the railing tool, because a railing is just a series of long pieces and a series of vertical short pieces. So that you can pretty much turn it on its side and you've got a sunshade, more or less. So we use rather than trying to work out how the whole thing needs to be parametrically designed, the railing tool is already set up as a parametric object, so we'll just use it. So I'll use the basic railing first of all. So we'll just draw a basic railing in here like this, and accept it. So this is the basic railing. This is our start point for the sunshade. Okay. So what we need to do is make a sunshade that looks something like, at the beginning of this lecture here, if I go up to the top, something like this. Just a very simple one, just as a start point. So if we look at that again, it's got 2 elements. It's got elements that are long and elements that are short, and they're kind of perpendicular to each other. So it really is using the railing tool to organize all that stuff for us. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to organize the modeling of this strut here. So how it's going to be held onto the building. And I'm going to do a very simple one. After I do the simple one, you're quite free to add more complex elements to it. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to do a very simple one. So what we do is we need to use families to a certain degree. So we go into the OR tool at the top here, New, Family. And what I've got here is a series of templates for the individual families. So because we're dealing with a railing, the railing is made up of rails and balusters, balusters being the vertical elements. So I'm going to use the metric baluster post as the template for the strut. Okay, so I'm going to double click on that. And here we have the front. Let's go to the front view. Zoom all. This is the template for the railing. This being the top of the railing, this being the bottom of the railing, and so on. But I'm going to just use the reference level and draw the strut sideways. So the way we do that is just to do an extrusion. So we go to Create, Extrude. It asks us to pick a plane. So I'm just going to pick the same plane that we're working on, which is the front back plane. Press OK. And I'm just going to quickly draw a rectangle in here like this. And then we can go in and select the individual lines and give them a specific distance. So let's say it's 1500 millimeters. And we make this one 150 millimeters, let's say, as a starting point. And let's give it a little bit of modeling on the end so it's not just a simple rectangle. I'll tell you what, we'll just give it a little curve on the end. So we give it a curve like that. So what I used there was the start-end arc. So I've got something that's kind of shaped like that. So that's going to be the shape of our strut. So we need to give it a three-dimensionality. And the way we do that is we come over to the extrusion properties over here. And I'm going to make the extrusion start at minus 25. And I'm going to end it at plus 25. So it's going to be 50 millimeters thick. Apply that. And then accept it. So now if I look at it in 3D, this is kind of what we have. So it's a very simple strut, just as a starting point. So let's give it a name. I'm going to save it on the desktop. Save as family. Put it on the desktop. And we'll just call it strut 1. Will I pause there for a second? No answer. I'll tell you what. I'll go all the way through the making the brise soleil, and then I'll stop and I'll do it again if you need it. Okay. So we've made the strut. So now we just load it into the project, the Healthy Housing Workshop, and go back into the 3D view. So now we have a strut loaded into the project as a baluster template. So all I need to do is replace these balusters here with the strut. So I'm going to select it, edit the type, and I'm going to make a new railing type, duplicating it, and just call it brise soleil. Let's change my Okay. So now we're just going to change the baluster placement here. So we're going to edit the baluster placement and change the baluster family to what we've just made, which is strut 1. And if I just apply that, press OK, you can see we've got these struts are coming out. Now they're all, they're the same dimension apart as the handrail. So we can quickly go back in there, edit the type, edit the baluster placement again, and we change the distance between them to whatever is realistic. So let's say it's 1500 again, just for the sake of argument. You can see at the ends we still have square balusters, so we can just switch those off, let's say. We don't need all the stuff in here. So let's just say none in all those cases. And if I apply that again, it looks something like that, okay? So that's kind of the start point. So we've made the kind of the baluster element. Now we have the opportunity to change the rails in exactly the same way to make the actual sunshades. And the way to do that is quite simple, because a railing is effectively, it's just a profile, a 2D profile that's extruded along a path. So all we need to do is draw a profile of the type of sunshade that we need. So again, we use the families. I'm going to say new family. By the way, this is the last thing I'm going to do, so just in case you're getting overloaded. So we'll do this again and then do it slowly again. So I just go and find metric profile, if I can find it there. LMNOP, metric profile. Open that. And you just get these crosshairs when you make the metric profile. So where the crosshairs meet is where the profile will be inserted into whatever you want to put it into. So that's where your starting point is. So I'm going to draw just a generic sunshade in here. I'm not going to worry too much about the shape of it. So I'm going to go to the Create tab and make a line. I'm going to draw it from the crosshairs here at 45 degrees for the moment. And I'm going to type in 150 mils long. So that's kind of going to be the angle of the sunshade. I'm going to give it a bit of form, so I go back to Create again, line, and I use this Start End Radius tool just to draw a curve from here to here, and we won't worry too much about it. We'll just say it's going to look like that, and we'll just mirror it across by using mirror, pick axis, and you get something like that, okay? And delete the center part. So it's really just a sketch of a shape, you know. And you can make it any shape you want, because all you're doing is you're making a profile that will be extruded along a path, okay? I'm videoing all this stuff, so if it's going a bit too fast, you can have a look at that when I manage to upload it, but otherwise we'll just do it again. So I'm going to save that as well. Save as family. Put it on the desktop, my favorite filing area. So we'll call that, we'll just call it shade. I think I've got one there already, but never mind. Save. Let's override that. So once we've given it a name, we load it back into the project again. And now we've got the profile in the project. All we need to do is apply the profile to the rail. So I'm just going to select it again, edit the type, go into the rail structure, and we'll rename this one shade. We'll change the height to, let's change the height to 150, because it has to be above the balusters, otherwise the balusters will disappear. And we'll just change the profile to the profile we've just made, which is shade. Here we can also give it a material. Let's just say aluminium for the sake of, because it's just there. And if I apply that, you can see that it makes a sunshade there. Like that. It's pointing in the wrong direction. We won't worry about that for the moment. So let's go back and just modify it a bit. Edit the type. Edit the rail structure. I'm going to offset it into over the top of the struts, just to be a little bit realistic. So let's say it's 50 mils over the top. Maybe even a bit more. Let's say 100. And then once we've made one of them, we can just copy them. So I'm just going to press this duplicate button here. So select the shade you've made, duplicate it as many times as you need, and then just go methodically through it and give each one an offset that makes sense. So I'm just going to offset them by 150, 550, 700, 850. Somebody tell me if I'm getting my maths wrong. 1150. And this is probably a bit too far, but let's do it anyway. So now it's generated a sunshade for us, which is, unfortunately, it's facing the wrong direction, because the sun is just obviously going to go through the sunshade. But you can always modify that. So I just go back in and find the profile. So we go back and find, where is it now? Shade. And I'll just select the shade and just use the mirror tool. Don't want to copy it. To mirror it around the reference line here. Load it back into the project. Overwrite the existing version. And now they're facing the other direction. So you can always go back in and modify the profile. So whatever profile you throw in there to start with, you can come back in, you can change the shape of it, you can change the material of it, you can change everything. So once you get it up and running, this is the kind of thing you have. So now we've made this brise soleil. I'm going to delete it. So it's in the memory of the project. Go back into level 1. If now I want to draw a sunshade here, I just go to the railing tool and make sure I choose the correct railing type, which is called brise soleil. And then I can just draw it from here to here, like that, and accept it. Perfectly inside the building. But if you go in, you can see these arrow tools, so you can always flip it the other direction like that. You can also select it and adjust it so it's offset to whatever you want. So let's offset it to 2800 above the ground level. So that means it's kind of sitting, well, maybe it's a bit too high there. Let's move it back down a little bit. Let's say 2.4. Oh, that's a little bit too low. 1, 4, 2, 4, 2. So then you have a sunshade. So then if we go back into the sun shading diagram that I made before, and we can't see it yet, but if we change the sun to when the sun is on this side, so let's go back down from 6 o'clock in the afternoon to let's say 11 and see how that's working. You can see that the shadows are being cast on the floor here, and as I go through, you can see that they are shading to a certain degree, but maybe not perfectly. So let's go back down again to, or if we go back a couple of hours, maybe if you want to modify it now, all you need to do is stretch the railing as far as it needs to go. So you can very quickly keep your sunshades in the right position. Okay? I'm not going to talk about any more than that. All I'm going to do from now on is just give you a hand to do that. And